Jake Morrison stood at the viewport of the transport ship, watching the massive space station grow larger as they approached. Kepler-7 was the biggest structure he had ever seen. The metal walls stretched out in all directions, covered with lights that blinked like stars. Somewhere inside that giant station was the Galactic Military Academy, and Jake was about to become its first human student. His stomach felt tight with worry. The other passengers on the ship were all aliens heading to the same place. There was a creature that looked like a walking tree with 4 arms. Another one had blue skin and eyes that glowed in the dark. A third alien was made entirely of what looked like living crystal. They all ignored Jake completely as if he wasn't even there. Jake touched the acceptance letter in his pocket. He had read it so many times that the words were burned into his memory. Congratulations, Cadet Morrison. You have been selected to attend the Galactic Military Academy. It still didn't feel real. 6 months ago, humans didn't even know other intelligent life existed. Now Jake was going to train alongside the best military minds from dozens of different worlds. The transport ship docked with a soft thud. Jake grabbed his single bag and followed the other passengers out. The docking bay was enormous, with a ceiling so high he couldn't see the top. Alien ships of every shape and size filled the space. Some looked like Earth ships, all metal and sharp angles. Others were smooth and curved like shells. A few seemed to be grown rather than built, with surfaces that looked almost alive. A tall figure approached the group of new arrivals. It had pale green skin and wore a uniform covered in medals and badges. When it spoke, its voice was deep and commanding. New cadets, follow me. You will be taken to your quarters and given your initial briefings. The Academy has trained the finest warriors in the galaxy for over 200 years. Most of you will not complete the program. Those who do will earn the right to serve in the Galactic Defense Force. Jake fell in line with the others as they walked through corridors that seemed to go on forever. The walls were covered with pictures of previous graduating classes. Jake studied the faces as they passed. He saw dozens of different species, but not a single human. Some of the aliens were huge, with thick armor-like skin. Others were small but had multiple arms or tentacles. All of them looked dangerous in their own way. They reached a section marked Cadet Quarters. The green-skinned instructor began calling out names and room assignments. When Jake's name was called, he noticed some of the other cadets turning to look at him. Their expressions ranged from curious to dismissive. Jake found his room and pressed his palm to the scanner. The door slid open to reveal a space barely big enough for 2 beds, 2 desks, and a small bathroom. One of the beds was already occupied by the strangest creature Jake had ever seen. It had 6 arms, each ending in hands that had too many fingers. Its head was roughly human-shaped but covered in what looked like purple scales. 2 large yellow eyes studied Jake as he entered. "So, you are the human," the creature said. Its voice sounded like gravel being poured into a metal bucket. "I am Crix of the Hexon Collective. I suppose we are to be roommates." Jake set his bag on the empty bed. "I'm Jake Morrison. Nice to meet you." Crix made a sound that might have been laughter. "Nice to meet me? Human, do you understand what this place is? This is not your Earth University where everyone gets a participation trophy. This is where the galaxy's warriors are forged. Most cadets who enter these halls never leave them alive." "I know it's going to be tough," Jake said, unpacking his few belongings. "But I'm here to learn and to serve." "You are here to die," Crix said bluntly. "Your species has no natural weapons, no armor plating, no enhanced strength or speed. You cannot even live as long as a Hexan child. I have seen your medical files. Your bones break easily. Your skin tears like paper. Why the Academy accepted you is a mystery that will likely solve itself within days." Jake felt his face grow hot, but he forced himself to stay calm. "Maybe we'll surprise you." Crix stood up, and Jake realized just how much bigger the alien was. Even with 6 arms, Crix moved gracefully as he gathered some items from his desk. "There are no surprises here, human. Only reality. I suggest you enjoy your brief time at the Academy. It may be the last experience of your short life." The alien left the room and Jake sat down on his bed. Through the small window he could see space stretching out in every direction. Earth was somewhere out there, but it felt impossibly far away. For the first time since leaving home, Jake wondered if he had made a terrible mistake. The next morning, Jake joined the other new cadets in what the schedule called orientation assembly. The room was huge, with seats arranged in rows that rose up like a stadium. Jake found a spot near the back and tried not to notice how the other cadets moved away from him. An imposing figure walked onto the stage. It was humanoid, but nearly 8 feet tall, with skin that looked like polished metal. When it spoke, its voice filled the entire room without any apparent effort. "I am Commander Vextar, Director of Cadet Training. You represent the finest specimens your species have to offer. You have been selected from millions of candidates across the galaxy, yet most of you will fail." The commander's eyes seemed to find Jake in the crowd. "Some of you may wonder why certain species are represented here. The Academy's mission is to find and train exceptional individuals, regardless of their origins. However, exceptional individuals from weak species often become dead individuals very quickly." Several cadets turned to look at Jake. He felt his face burning but kept his eyes focused on the stage. Commander Vextar continued, "Your training begins immediately. You will be pushed beyond what you believe are your limits. Your instructors will show no mercy because your enemies will show none. Those who survive will become guardians of galactic peace. Those who do not will serve as examples to others." The assembly ended, and Jake followed the crowd toward the training facilities. The gymnasium was enormous, filled with equipment designed for beings much larger and stronger than humans. Obstacle courses stretched across the floor, with barriers that reached Jake's chest and gaps that seemed impossible to cross. A new instructor appeared, this one covered in what looked like black fur. Its voice was a low growl. "Form groups of 4. You will attempt the basic obstacle course. Anyone who cannot complete it in under 10 minutes will be removed from the program immediately." Jake found himself grouped with 3 aliens. One was Crix, his roommate. The second was a tall, thin creature with silver skin that seemed to glow. The third looked like a walking boulder with arms and legs. "This should be entertaining," Crix muttered as they approached the starting line. The whistle blew and the race began. The boulder-like alien simply smashed through obstacles that the others had to climb over. The silver-skinned creature moved with impossible grace, flowing over barriers like liquid. Crix used his 6 arms to swing from obstacle to obstacle with ease. Jake ran as hard as he could, but he was quickly falling behind. The first barrier was as tall as his shoulders. While the others easily leaped over it, Jake had to climb. By the time he reached the top, his teammates were already far ahead. Halfway through the course, Jake's lungs were burning and his legs felt like rubber. Other groups were finishing while he was still struggling with obstacles that seemed designed for beings twice his size. Some of the alien cadets had stopped to watch, pointing and making sounds that were probably laughter in their languages. Jake crossed the finish line in last place, gasping for air. The instructor looked at a timer and shook his head. 15 minutes, 37 seconds. Human Cadet Morrison, report to medical for evaluation. You may not be physically capable of continuing this program. As Jake walked toward the medical bay, he heard whispers from the other cadets. "Told you the human wouldn't last. Why did they even accept his application? I give him 3 days before he quits or dies." Jake kept walking, his fists clenched at his sides. Maybe they were right. Maybe he was out of his league. But he had not come this far just to give up on the first day. Whatever it took, however. Impossible, it seemed. Jake Morrison was going to find a way to survive at the Galactic Military Academy. 3 months had passed since Jake's first day at the academy. The days blurred together in a constant cycle of pain, exhaustion, and determination. Every morning brought new challenges that seemed designed to break him. Combat training against opponents twice his size. Endurance runs in gravity 3 times stronger than Earth's. Tactical simulations where he faced enemies that could read minds or move faster than his eyes could follow. Jake had not quit. He had not died, but he had not excelled either. His scores were barely passing in most subjects. The other cadets still whispered about him, though now it was more curiosity than mockery. How was the weak human still here when stronger cadets had already washed out? Crix had become something close to a friend, though the Hexan would never admit it. "You are like a parasite," he told Jake one evening as they studied tactical manuals. "Too stubborn to die, too weak to thrive. I do not understand your species." "We don't give up easily," Jake replied, rubbing a bruise on his arm from that day's sparring session. "There is a difference between persistence and stupidity," Crix said. But there was something in his voice that wasn't entirely critical. The routine changed on a cold Tuesday morning. Commander Vextar entered their advanced tactics classroom with an expression that made all the cadets sit up straighter. "Today you begin your first real mission," the commander announced. "This is not a simulation. You will board the research vessel Aurora's Edge and conduct a patrol of the Sigma Quadrant. Your objectives are simple: investigate any unusual activity and report back to the Academy. Most importantly, do not engage hostile forces without direct authorization." Jake felt his heart rate increase. After 3 months of training, they were finally going to leave the station. The other cadets seemed excited, chattering in their various languages about the mission ahead. The commander continued reading from his tablet. "Boarding teams will consist of 4 cadets each. Team 7 will include Cadets Morrison, Crix, Lysara, and Kethmore. You will report to Docking Bay 5 in 1 hour." Jake looked around at his assigned teammates. He knew them all from classes, though he had never worked closely with any except Crix. Lysara was a Vextai, one of the telepathic species. She was tall and graceful, with pale blue skin and large dark eyes that seemed to see right through people. Kethmore was a Zephyrian, his body made of living crystal that changed colors depending on his mood. An hour later, the 4 cadets stood in the docking bay looking at their transport. The Aurora's Edge was smaller than Jake had expected, built for speed rather than comfort. The ship's captain, a gruff alien with gray skin and too many teeth, greeted them with obvious displeasure. "Cadets," he growled. "This is a working vessel, not a pleasure cruise. Stay out of the cruise way and follow orders without question. We'll be in the Sigma Quadrant for 72 hours. Try not to break anything." The journey to their patrol zone took 6 hours. Jake spent most of the time studying star charts and mission protocols. The Sigma Quadrant was supposed to be empty space, far from any inhabited systems. It was considered a safe assignment for first-time missions. That assumption proved wrong on their second day of patrol. "Captain," the communications officer called, out. "We're receiving a distress signal. It's weak, but it appears to be coming from a Malarian diplomatic vessel." The captain frowned. "Malarians? What would diplomats be doing out here?" He turned to the cadets. "This might be your chance to see some real action. The Malarians are a peaceful species. If they're in distress, it's likely not a military matter." The Aurora's Edge changed course toward the signal. As they got closer, their sensors picked up 2 ships. One was clearly Malarian, its elegant curves and smooth hull unmistakable. The other was darker, more angular, with weapon ports that looked ready for battle. "Syndicate raiders," the captain said grimly. This just became a lot more complicated. Jake had heard about the Syndicate in his classes. They were pirates and criminals who operated outside galactic law. They attacked merchant ships, took hostages, and sold captured beings as slaves. They were also known for being completely ruthless. "We should call for backup," Lysara suggested, her mental abilities already reaching out to scan the area around the ships. "The nearest patrol ship is 8 hours away," the captain replied. "If there are Malarian diplomats on that ship, they might not have 8 hours. Kethmore's crystal body flickered from blue to red, a sign of agitation in his species. "What are our orders?" The captain was quiet for a long moment, then he turned to the cadets. "You're the military personnel here, even if you're just students. The Malarians are our allies, those raiders are criminals. What would you do?" Jake felt all eyes turn to him. As the human, he was often ignored in group decisions. But now, with lives at stake, his opinion seemed to matter. "We have to try to help them," he said. "But we need to be smart about it. The raiders probably have the Malarians as hostages. A direct attack could get everyone killed." Crix nodded his agreement. "The human is correct. We need to board the raider ship quietly and rescue the hostages before fighting begins." My telepathic abilities could help, Lysara added. I can sense how many raiders are on the ship and where they're located. And my crystalline structure makes me resistant to energy weapons, Kethmore said. I could provide cover if fighting starts. The captain looked impressed despite himself. All right, cadets. We'll move in quietly and dock with the raider ship. You'll board and attempt a rescue, but remember, you're students, not seasoned warriors. Don't take unnecessary risks. The next hour was spent preparing for the mission. Jake checked his equipment 3 times. Standard energy pistol, emergency medical kit, communications device, and portable scanner. The other cadets had similar gear, though their natural abilities gave them advantages Jake lacked. The Aurora's Edge approached the raider ship from its blind spot. The docking procedure was tense, everyone expecting alarms to sound at any moment. But the raiders seemed focused on their prisoners and didn't notice the approaching ship. The airlock opened with a soft hiss. Jake stepped through first, his weapon drawn but set to stun. The interior of the raider ship was dark and smelled of machine oil and something else Jake didn't want to identify. Lysara closed her eyes and extended her mental senses. I count 12 raiders on the ship, she whispered. Most of them are in the cargo bay with the prisoners, 3 are on the bridge. 1 is patrolling the corridors. How many prisoners? Jake asked. 7 Malarians. They're frightened but unharmed. Crix was already moving down the corridor, his 6 arms allowing him to hold multiple weapons while also using hand signals to communicate. Jake followed, trying to move as quietly as possible despite his heavier footsteps. They found the patrolling raider near the ship's engine room. He was a large brutish creature with scarred skin and cybernetic implants. Crix took him down silently with a sleeper hold that would have been impossible for someone with only 2 arms. The team moved toward the cargo bay where the hostages were being held. Through a small window in the door, Jake could see the Malarian diplomats huddled together in the center of the room. They were elegant beings with long limbs and faces that reminded Jake of ancient Earth statues. Several raiders with heavy weapons surrounded them. We need a distraction, Jake whispered. Something to draw the guards away from the prisoners. I could create a false emergency, Kethmore suggested. My crystal form can generate electromagnetic pulses. I could make it look like the ship's systems are failing. It was a good plan, but it went wrong almost immediately. As Kethmore began generating his electromagnetic pulse, one of the raiders noticed the strange energy readings. Instead of investigating alone, he called for backup. We've been discovered, Lysara said urgently. They're coming this way. Jake made a quick decision. Crix, get to the prisoners. Lysara, use your telepathy to confuse the raiders. Kethmore, can you block the corridor? What about you? Crix asked. I'll create a real distraction. Before anyone could stop him, Jake ran toward the ship's reactor room. He had studied the schematics during the flight and knew exactly what he was looking for. If he could overload one of the secondary power couplings, it would create enough noise and confusion to cover the rescue. He found the power coupling and began rerouting energy through it, far more than it was designed to handle. Warning lights began flashing throughout the ship. The raiders' voices grew louder and more panicked. Jake was so focused on his work that he didn't notice the raider creeping up behind him until it was too late. The alien's weapon discharged, and Jake felt an explosion of pain as the energy blast threw him against the bulkhead. As darkness closed in around him, Jake heard someone shouting about a plasma grenade. The raiders were going to destroy their own ship rather than let the prisoners escape. The last thing Jake saw was a brilliant flash of light, and then everything went black. The plasma grenade exploded with the force of a small star. The blast tore through the raider ship's reactor room, melting metal and turning the air itself into fire. The explosion was so bright that it could be seen from the Aurora's Edge, watching, helplessly from their docked position. Crix threw himself against the cargo bay door, using all 6 arms to force it open. Inside, the Malarian prisoners cowered as debris rained down from the ceiling. The raiders guarding them were shouting, in panic, their weapons forgotten as they tried to understand what was happening to their ship. The human did something to the reactor, one of the raiders yelled. The whole section is going to blow. Lysara pressed her hands to her temples, her telepathic abilities overwhelmed by the chaos of thoughts around her. Fear, anger, and confusion crashed through her mind like waves. But underneath it all, she sensed something impossible, a familiar presence that should have been gone forever. "Jake," she whispered, her dark eyes wide with shock. Kethmore's crystalline body was flashing between colors rapidly, a sign of extreme distress in his species. The blast readings show complete molecular destruction in the reactor room. Nothing organic could survive that level of plasma exposure. The three cadets worked together to secure the prisoners while the raiders fled toward their escape pods. The Malarian diplomats were shaken but unharmed, their elegant faces showing gratitude despite their fear. As the team prepared to evacuate, back to the Aurora's edge, Crick stopped at the sealed door leading to the reactor section. "We cannot leave him," the Hexan said quietly. "Even if there is nothing left to recover, we must try." "The radiation levels are too high," Kethmore protested. "We would die before we could reach the reactor room." "Then we wait," Crick said firmly. "When the levels drop, we go back for our teammate." It took 20 minutes for the radiation to decrease to barely survivable levels. The three alien cadets put on emergency suits and forced their way through the twisted wreckage that had once been a corridor. The metal walls were melted and warped. The floor was covered with debris that crunched under their boots. The reactor room was completely destroyed. Where there had once been sophisticated machinery, there was now only twisted metal and pools of cooling plasma. The air shimmered with residual heat. According to their scanners, the temperature was hot enough to melt bone. They found Jake at the far end of the room, thrown against a bulkhead by the force of the explosion. His body was motionless, his uniform scorched black. Lisara's scanner showed no heartbeat, no brain activity, no signs of life at all. "He has been dead for over 3 minutes," she said softly. The plasma exposure alone should have destroyed every cell in his body. Crix knelt beside Jake's still form. Despite his earlier harsh words about humans being weak, the Hexan had grown to respect his stubborn roommate. He saved the prisoners. He died with honor. As they prepared to lift Jake's body, something impossible happened. His chest moved. Just slightly, barely visible, but it was definitely rising and falling. "That is not possible," Kethmore said, his crystal body turning white with shock. The readings clearly show no vital signs. Jake's eyes opened. They were different somehow, more focused and alert than they had ever been. He looked around the destroyed room as if seeing it for the first time, taking in every detail with perfect clarity. "We need to finish the mission," Jake said, his voice calm and steady. There was no sign of pain or confusion, despite the fact that he had been clinically dead moments before. The three alien cadets stared at him in stunned silence. According to every medical database in the galaxy, Jake should be nothing more than ash and melted bone. The plasma exposure should have liquefied his internal organs. The impact trauma should have shattered every bone in his body. Yet he was, not only alive but conscious and apparently uninjured. "Jake," Lisara said carefully, "you were caught in a plasma explosion. You should be dead." Jake looked down at his scorched uniform and the burns on his hands. He seemed to notice them for the first time, as if they belonged to someone else. "I remember the blast. I remember the pain. Then I remember something else." He stood up, and his movements were different. More fluid, more controlled. There was something in his posture that spoke of absolute confidence, as if he knew exactly what needed to be done and how to do it. "The prisoners are safe?" he asked. "Yes," Crix replied, still staring at his supposedly dead roommate. "But Jake, you need medical attention. What happened to you should have been fatal." "We can worry about that later," Jake said. "Right now we have raiders trying to escape with intelligence about Malarian diplomatic routes. We cannot let them get away." Before anyone could argue, Jake was moving through the wreckage toward the ship's bridge. His steps were sure and confident, even though the twisted metal and debris made the path treacherous. It was as if he could see the safest route without even thinking about it. The other cadets hurried to follow him. Lisara tried to read Jake's mind with her telepathic abilities, but what she found there made her stumble. Instead of the chaotic thoughts she expected from someone who had just survived the impossible, Jake's mind was perfectly calm and organized. Every thought was focused with laser precision on the mission ahead. They reached the bridge to find 3 raiders frantically trying to start the ship's engines. The plasma explosion had damaged many of the ship's systems, and they were having trouble getting power to the main drives. "Surrender now and you will be treated according to galactic law," Jake called out as he entered the bridge. The raiders turned to face the cadets, and their expressions shifted from panic to cruel amusement. They were larger and more heavily armed than the cadets. Their leader, a massive creature with forearms and cybernetic implants covering half his face, laughed. "4 students think they can capture us? You should have stayed in school, children." What happened next would be talked about in academy halls for years to come. Jake moved like he had been fighting raiders his entire life. When the first pirate raised his weapon, Jake was already moving, diving behind cover before the energy blast could find him. He rolled to his feet and returned fire with perfect accuracy, his shot hitting the raider's weapon and disabling it without harming the alien. Tew, second raider tried to flank around the side, but Jake seemed to know exactly where he would be. Without even looking, Jake tossed a disabled power coupling in the raider's direction. The heavy piece of equipment struck the alien in the chest, knocking him unconscious. The leader charged forward with a roar, his forearms swinging weapons in a deadly pattern. Jake ducked under the first swing, stepped inside the second, and struck pressure points on the raider's arms that Crix had never seen a human use before. The massive alien dropped his weapons and fell to his knees, paralyzed but alive. The entire fight lasted less than 30 seconds. 3 experienced raiders had been defeated by a human who should have been dead, using techniques that no academy instructor had ever taught. "How did you do that?" Kethmore asked, his crystal body flickering through colors of amazement. Jake looked at his hands as if they belonged to someone else. "I am not sure. During the explosion, everything became very clear. I could see exactly what each of them would do before they did it. Their movements, their tactics, their weaknesses. It was all so obvious." Lysara reached out with her telepathic abilities and touched Jake's mind again. What she found there was extraordinary. Neural pathways that had not existed before were now active and growing stronger. His brain was processing information at speeds that should have been impossible for his species. "Something has changed in you," she said quietly. "The explosion did not just fail to kill you. It awakened something." Jake secured the unconscious raiders while the others accessed the ship's computer systems. They found detailed intelligence about Malarian trade routes, diplomatic schedules, and defense capabilities. The information would have allowed the Syndicate to attack peaceful vessels with perfect timing. As they prepared to return to the Aurora's edge with their prisoners and rescued diplomats, Crix pulled Jake aside. The Hexon's yellow eyes studied his roommate with new respect and something that might have been fear. "What you did today was impossible," Crix said quietly. "No human should have survived that blast. No student should have been able to defeat experienced raiders so easily." "What are you?" Jake looked out through the bridge viewport at the stars beyond. He felt different, changed in ways he could not fully understand. The explosion had not just failed to kill him. It had revealed something that had always been there, waiting beneath the surface. "I am still human," Jake said finally. "But maybe being human means something different than we thought." As their ship headed back to the academy, none of them realized that they were carrying with them the first proof of humanity's greatest secret. When pushed to the absolute limit, when death seemed certain and failure meant the loss of innocent lives, humans did not simply fight harder. They became something more than human altogether. The journey back to the academy took 8 hours. Jake spent most of that time answering questions from his teammates, but his answers only made the mystery deeper. He remembered the explosion clearly. He remembered the pain of the plasma burning through his body. He remembered his heart stopping and his vision going black. Then he remembered something else. A moment when everything became perfectly clear. The layout of the ship, the location of every raider, the best strategy to save the prisoners and capture the criminals. It had all come to him in an instant, as if someone had downloaded the information directly into his brain. It was like seeing the whole situation from above, Jake explained to Crix as they sat in the ship's small medical bay. I knew exactly what would happen before it happened. I could predict every move the raiders would make. Crix examined the scanner readings from Jake's medical check. The numbers made no sense. Jake's cellular regeneration rate was 3 times higher than it had been before the mission. His reflexes had improved by over 200%. Most puzzling of all, his brain scans showed new neural pathways that definitely had not existed 3 days ago. These readings are impossible, Crix muttered, his 6 arms working several different instruments at once. Brains do not just grow new connections overnight. Cells do not suddenly start healing faster. What happened to you should not be medically possible. Lysara was sitting quietly in the corner, her telepathic abilities still focused on Jake's mind. What she found there fascinated and frightened her. His thoughts were organized in ways she had never seen before. Where most minds were chaotic collections of memories, emotions, and random thoughts, Jake's mind was like a perfectly organized library. Every piece of information had its place, and he could access any of it instantly. There are stories about your species, she said softly. Old tales that other races dismissed as mythology. They spoke of humans who could lift impossible weights to save their children. Soldiers who fought on with mortal wounds that should have killed them instantly. Survivors who endured conditions that would destroy any other species. Jake looked at her with interest. What kind of stories? The Krithari have records of human prisoners who broke through walls with their bare hands when their families were threatened. The Hexon archives mention human colonists who survived in deep space for weeks without proper life support. The Vextai historical databases are full of accounts of humans performing impossible feats under extreme stress. Keth Moore's crystal body was pulsing with a steady blue light, which meant he was deep in thought. My people have a saying about humans. We call you the never-dying ones. Not because you live forever, but because you refuse to stay dead when others need you to. Live. When they arrived at the academy, Jake was immediately taken to the medical center. Dr. Velthari, the chief medical officer, was waiting for them. She was a tall, elegant being with silver skin and eyes that seemed to glow with inner light. Jake had seen her around the academy but had never spoken to her directly. Cadet Morrison, she said in a voice like musical chimes, I have been studying your medical records since we received the mission report. What happened to you is unprecedented in my 200 years of xenobiology research. The medical examination took 6 hours. Dr. Velthari ran every test she could think of, and several she had to invent on the spot. Jake's blood showed chemical changes that should not have been possible. His bone density had increased by 15%. His muscle fibers were stronger and more efficient than they had been before the mission. Most remarkable of all, Jake had developed new glands in his adrenal system. They were small, barely visible on the scanners, but they were definitely there, and definitely active. No human had ever been documented with such glands before. I need to access classified files, Dr. Velthari told Jake after the examination was complete. There may be information about your species that could explain what we are seeing. That evening, Jake sat in his room while Crick studied at his desk. The Hexen had been unusually quiet since their return, occasionally glancing at Jake as if he were looking at a completely different person. You saved my life today, Crick said suddenly. When that raider was about to shoot me, you moved faster than I have ever seen anyone move. You put yourself between me and the weapon without even thinking about it. Jake nodded. You would have done the same for me. No, Crick said seriously. I would have calculated the risks first. I would have looked for a safer way to help. But you just acted without any concern for your own safety. That is not normal behavior for any species I know. Before Jake could respond, there was a knock at their door. Dr. Velthari entered, carrying a tablet filled with information. Her expression was a mixture of fascination and concern. I have spent the entire day reviewing classified files about human evolution and physiology, she began. What I found explains everything and nothing at the same time. She activated a holographic display that showed human anatomical charts. Your species is unique in the galaxy. Most intelligent life evolved to become stronger, faster, or more resilient than their ancestors. Humans evolved something completely different. You evolved the ability to transcend your own limitations when faced with impossible situations. The display changed to show brain scans and chemical analyses. Every human carries dormant genetic sequences that activate only under extreme stress. When your life or the lives of others are in mortal danger, your body can temporarily become something beyond its normal capabilities. Jake stared at the information floating in front of him. You mean this has happened to other humans? Throughout your history, Dr. Velthari confirmed, your planet's records are full of accounts that other species dismissed as exaggeration or mythology. Mothers lifting vehicles to save trapped children, soldiers continuing to fight with wounds that should have been instantly fatal, survivors enduring conditions that would kill any other known species. She pulled up more data. The key factor is always the same. The human must be facing a situation where failure means death or suffering for themselves or others. In those moments, your species can access abilities that normally remain hidden. Crix was studying the holographic display with all 6 of his eyes. So Jake's survival of the plasma blast was not impossible. It was just his species' hidden nature revealing itself. Exactly, Dr. Velthari said. The explosion should have killed him, and by normal standards it did kill him, but his body refused to accept death when others still needed his help. His cellular regeneration increased dramatically. His neural pathways reorganized to process information more efficiently. His adrenal system developed new glands to support enhanced physical performance. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. How many humans can do this? We believe all humans carry this potential, Dr. Velthari replied. But it only activates under very specific circumstances. The threat must be genuine and immediate. The stakes must be high enough to trigger your deepest survival instincts. And most importantly, you must be fighting not just for yourself, but for others. The doctor's expression grew more serious. This information is being classified at the highest levels. The implications for galactic security are enormous. If other species learn that humans can temporarily exceed their physical limitations under stress, it could change the balance of power in the galaxy. Jake thought about the raiders they had captured, the Malarian diplomats they had saved, and the moment when everything had become perfectly clear. Is this permanent? Will I always be like this now? We do not know, Dr. Velthari admitted. This is the first time we have been able to study the phenomenon in real time. Your enhanced abilities may fade over time, or they may remain as long as you continue to face dangerous situations. Human physiology is still largely a mystery to us. As the doctor prepared to leave, she turned back to Jake one more time. There is something else you should know. The Galactic Council has been monitoring reports of human activity across the galaxy. Stories of impossible rescues, unlikely victories, and miraculous survivals. They are beginning to realize that your species may be far more dangerous than anyone initially believed. After she left, Jake and Crix sat in silence for a long time. Finally, the Hexan spoke. I understand now why the Academy accepted you, Crix said quietly. It was not because humans are weak and the instructors wanted to be inclusive. It was because someone suspected what your species was truly capable of. Jake looked out the window at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, other humans were living ordinary lives, unaware of the potential that lay dormant within them. They went to work, raised families, and faced everyday challenges, never knowing that in moments of ultimate crisis, they could become something extraordinary. What happens now? Jake asked. Crix was quiet for a moment. Now we finish our training. We graduate from the Academy, and we hope that the galaxy is ready for what humanity truly represents. As Jake prepared for sleep that night, he could feel the changes in his body settling into place. His enhanced reflexes, his improved healing, his ability to process information at superhuman speeds. They felt natural now, as if they had always been part of him, but he also understood something else. These abilities came with a price. Word spread through the Academy faster than a plasma fire. Within days, every cadet knew about the human who had died and come back to life. The story grew with each telling. Some said Jake had fought off 20 raiders single-handed. Others claimed he had walked through solid walls to reach the prisoners. A few insisted he could now read minds and see the future. Jake tried to ignore the whispers and stares as he walked through the corridors. His enhanced hearing meant he could pick up conversations from across the room, whether he wanted to or not. The other cadets talked about him in dozens of languages, but the meaning was always the same. Fear mixed with curiosity. Wonder touched by unease. The alien instructors treated him differently now, too. During combat training, they paired him with opponents twice his previous skill level. In tactical simulations, they gave him scenarios that would have challenged senior officers. It was as if they were testing the limits of his new abilities, trying to understand what humans were truly capable of. Commander Vextar called Jake to his office 1 week after the mission. The massive alien sat behind a desk that seemed too small for his 8-foot frame, studying reports on multiple screens. "Cadet Morrison," the commander said without looking up. "Your mission report has been reviewed by the highest levels of Galactic Command. They are very interested in your performance." Jake stood at attention. "Yes, sir." "They are also concerned," the commander continued. "In 300 years of galactic cooperation, no species has demonstrated the ability to spontaneously evolve. During active combat, your survival and subsequent performance have raised questions about human potential that we are not prepared to answer." The commander finally looked directly at Jake. "Tell me, Cadet, do you believe other humans could do what you did?" Jake thought carefully before answering. "I do not know, sir. Dr. Velthari says all humans carry the potential, but it only activates under very specific conditions. Conditions involving mortal danger and the need to protect others," the commander said. "Conditions that are unfortunately common in military service." Over the following weeks, Jake's training intensified. He was moved to advanced classes normally, reserved for final-year cadets. His new abilities made the coursework easier, but they also isolated him further from his peers. Even Crick seemed uncertain around him sometimes, watching Jake with the careful attention someone might give to a dangerous but unpredictable weapon. The isolation ended when 3 new human cadets arrived at the academy. Lisa Park, Danny Rodriguez, and Sam Carter had all scored exceptionally high on their entrance exams. They were the second group of humans ever accepted into the program, and they looked to Jake as both inspiration and guide. "Is it true what they say about you?" Lisa asked during their first meeting in the academy's common area. She was small but carried herself with the confidence of someone who had never backed down from a challenge. "What do they say?" Jake replied. "That you died and came back to life, that you can fight like 10 warriors, that humans are secretly the most dangerous species in the galaxy." Jake looked at the 3 young humans, all eager and determined and completely unprepared for what lay ahead. "What I can tell you is that humans do not give up. When everything seems impossible, when death looks certain, we find a way to keep going. That is what makes us human." Danny, a tall young man with serious eyes, leaned forward. "But the enhanced abilities? The increased strength and speed? Those come when they are needed," Jake said carefully. "When others are in danger and you are the only one who can help them." The new human cadets threw themselves into their training with the same determination Jake had shown. They struggled with the same physical challenges, faced the same skeptical instructors, and endured the same whispered doubts from their alien classmates. But they also had something Jake had not possessed during his early days. They had proof that humans could succeed at the academy. 3 months later, the academy faced its first major crisis in decades. A distress signal came from the mining colony on Theta 7. The message was fragmented and unclear, but it mentioned syndicate raiders and civilian casualties. Every available ship was dispatched to help, including several training vessels with cadet crews. Jake found himself assigned as team leader for a mixed group that included the 3 new human cadets and several alien students he had trained with over the past year. Among them was Zara, a young Vextai who had become one of Jake's closest friends, and Brutus, a massive Krathari warrior whose respect Jake had finally earned. The journey to Theta 7 took 2 days. During that time, Jake worked with his team to plan their approach. The new human cadets watched him carefully, trying to understand how he processed information so quickly and made decisions with such confidence. "You think differently now," Lisa observed during one planning session. "Before we ask a question, you already know what we are going to say." Jake paused in his review of the colony's layout. "The explosion changed more than just my physical abilities. I can see patterns more clearly now, predict outcomes more accurately, but it only works when lives are at stake." When they arrived at Theta 7, they found a scene of devastation. The mining colony's main buildings were damaged by weapons fire. Several smaller structures were completely destroyed. The colonists who survived were hiding in the deep mining tunnels, afraid to come to the surface. The Syndicate raiders had taken over the colony's command center and were systematically looting everything of value. Intelligence reports suggested they had at least 30 fighters and were planning to sell the captured colonists as slaves. Jake's team consisted of only 12 cadets, but they had several advantages. They knew the colony's layout from orbital scans. They had surprise on their side. Most importantly, they were fighting to save innocent lives, which meant Jake's enhanced abilities were fully active. The battle for Theta 7 became legendary at the Academy. Jake led his team through the colony with tactical precision that seasoned officers would have envied. He seemed to know exactly where each enemy would be positioned, which routes would be safest, and how to maximize their limited resources. But the most remarkable thing was what happened to the other human cadets. When the fighting grew desperate, when it seemed like they might not be able to save all the colonists, something awakened in Lisa, Danny, and Sam. Not to the same extent as Jake's transformation, but enough to make a difference. Lisa found herself moving faster than she ever had before, reaching trapped colonists ahead of pursuing raiders. Danny discovered he could lift debris that should have required 3 people to move. Sam began anticipating enemy tactics with an accuracy that amazed his alien teammates. Zara, watching her human teammates, finally understood what Dr. Velthari had tried to explain. "You are not just fighting harder," she told Jake as they secured the last group of prisoners. "You are becoming something more than what you were." The mission was a complete success. All the colonists were rescued, most of the raiders were captured, and the Academy cadets had proven themselves against experienced criminals. But more importantly, it demonstrated that Jake's abilities were not unique among humans. When pushed to their limits while protecting others, all humans seemed capable of exceeding their normal capabilities. Word of the Theta 7 mission reached the highest levels of galactic government. Emergency sessions were called to discuss the implications of humanity's hidden potential. Some species argued that humans should be restricted from military service, viewing them as too unpredictable and dangerous. Others insisted that humanity's abilities made them valuable allies who should be courted and protected. Jake graduated from the academy at the top of his class, but the ceremony was unlike any in the institution's history. Representatives from dozens of worlds attended, all eager to see the human who had changed their understanding of what was possible. As Jake stood before the assembled crowd, wearing his new lieutenant's uniform, he thought about how much had changed since his first day at the academy. The alien cadets who had once dismissed humans as weak and fragile now competed for positions on human-led teams. The instructors who had expected him to wash out within weeks now studied human training methods. Commander Vextar presented Jake with his commission in the Galactic Defense Force. "Lieutenant Morrison," he said, his voice carrying across the Great Hall, "you have shown us that strength is not always about the size of your muscles or the thickness of your armor. Sometimes it is about the refusal to give up when others need you to succeed." After the ceremony, Jake stood with his human teammates looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, Earth continued its quiet existence, unaware that its children had revealed one of humanity's greatest secrets to the galaxy. "What happens now?" Danny asked. Jake smiled, thinking of the challenges ahead. Other species would test humanity's resolve. New threats would emerge that required impossible responses. But he was no longer worried about humanity's place in the galaxy. "Now we show them what humans do when someone needs protecting," Jake said. "We refuse to fail. We refuse to give up. and we refused to let anyone stand in our way. In the weeks that followed, Jake received his first assignment as a full officer. Intelligence reports suggested that Syndicate forces were planning a major offensive against human colonies.